Hello, writerly friends! It's Friday! And I always like to have a bit of a writing challenge on Friday for all of you writerly friends. But I thought that since NaNoWriMo just finished, quite a few of you are recharging your writerly batteries. So instead of a challenge, this week I have something a little different. I thought, well, I want to get to know you better, I want you to get to know me better, and we should do all of that while looking at our story from a different perspective. Also, I'm a giant Pokemon nerd, so I thought, why don't we transpose the elements of Pokemon into our stories and see how crazy it would be? I like to call this Writer Tag, Pokemon AU. If you are at all familiar with the tag videos, allow me to explain to you the way they go. It's basically just a virtual questionnaire. You can reply to these questions, which are in the description below, by the way, in textual form, in a blog post, or in video format, bonus points if you do so. And you basically just get to know your friends and get to look at your story from a different point of view. Why an alternate universe with Pokemon in it? Well, Omega Ruby, I was gonna say Omega Red, that's how much of a nerd I am. Max said as he made a video about Pokemon. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire just recently came out, and they got me thinking, once again, thinking about the world of Pokemon and how odd it is, and how weirder our stories would be if we were to transpose the elements of that world into our books. That, and I like asking silly questions that get us to look at our characters from a different point of view. So you know what? I thought, let's put them together. You'll get to know me better, I'll get to know you better, and we'll just enjoy the silliness that is the world of Pokemon. Again, all you have to do is just reply to the questions that you can find in the description below. You can put it in the comments, you can reply to the Tumblr post, or you can make a video of your own. Bonus points if you do so, by the way. I would love to see your pretty faces answering these silly questions. Talking about silly questions though, let's dive right in! First, let's get to know you, or rather me, the author. How did you first discover Pokemon? I was a little lass in Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico. Spoilers. I remember that I used to subscribe. That's a lie. I didn't subscribe to a magazine because I was poor. I would go to the magazine stand like the first Tuesday of every month to pick up the latest copy of Club Nintendo, which was the official Nintendo magazine of Mexico. That was like 15 pesos back in the day. And I remember that I picked up the first copy that I picked up, I remember it because it had Link in the cover, and it was like the reveal copy for Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And I love that first magazine because I am the sort of person, I love lists. I love seeing, like, character profiles, and that one magazine had all of the characters for F-Zero for the 64, and it had all of the 151 Pokemon from Pokemon Blue and Red. And I remember reading through all of the little facts and all of the information, and I thought it was amazing. And soon enough, I think Pokemon, the animation came... the animated series came to Mexico, translated in Spanish, and that was silly, and I loved it, and eventually I was able to save enough money to pick up my own copy of Pokemon Blue. My favorite Pokemon game! Although I love Blue, I enjoyed the heck out of Blue, I have too many fond memories with Silver and Gold. All of that being said though, like main series Pokemon game, it has to be Silver. I loved Silver. But there is a different Pokemon game that takes the crown for me, and that is Pokemon Stadium 2. I loved Pokemon Stadium 2. It was, like, objectively, basically in every aspect, shape, and form, better than Pokemon Stadium 1, and it was basically the same game with more things, more mini-games, like 3 different stories you could go through, tutorials for how to actually play the game and have combos, and, like, expert strategies. It was just a crazy good game. One of the few games that, like, I still have to this day and I enjoy playing. No, seriously, Pokemon Stadium 2 is amazing. And the fact that you could just, you know, take your transfer pack and just, like, slide your game in and use your own Pokemon, and also do, like, little things like the mystery gift, and have your own room in 3 dimensions, and it's just ridiculous. Like, I liked Silver, but Pokemon Stadium 2 made it even better. What is my favorite Pokemon? Now, this is actually like a really tough question because there's just like hundreds upon hundreds of Pokemon, and just picking one is really, really tough. Because there are Pokemon that I like aesthetically, there are Pokemon that I like lore-wise, and there's Pokemon that I just like because they're really useful. All of that being said though, I do like... Generally, I find that for questions like this, the first thing that comes to mind is usually the correct answer, and I have to say that I like this Pokemon not only because it's basically the same types that I would be, which I just love Water and Psychic. They're like my favorite types. And this Pokemon is not only Water and Psychic, but it is also kind of representative of how silly I am as a person, and the way that I tend to be sometimes. What Pokemon is this? It's Slowpoke. It's clearly a Slowpoke. I am a Slowpoke sometimes. Something happens in the world and I don't discover it until like 2 weeks later, and everyone is like, yeah, Max, we know about this. And I'm like, but guys, Anaconda is a ridiculous song. Have you seen it? And everyone's like, yeah, we saw it like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, isn't it ridiculous? So yeah, Slowpoke, because I am basically Slowpoke. I am the embodiment of Slowpoke. If you were a gym leader, what would be your gym's theme and Pokemon type? So, I came up with this question, and I didn't realize until I wrote it, like, that I had never stopped to consider this, because I love Pokemon, and of course, while you watch the show and you play the game, you put yourself in that world, but you never stop to think, how would I live in this world? And if I was a gym leader, I have to, like, stop and think, because, like, yeah, the writer theme is easy, like, I could just be a library, but that's boring. So I was thinking, you know what? I am trash. I admit, I'm trash. I'm absolute trash. So my gym would be, like, a garbage treatment facility or like a recycling facility, and like you would walk in and it looks like a junkyard and it's like really grimy, and all of the people you have to fight are like big burly men and women, and then like you have to like do like a conveyor belt mini game or like a puzzle, you know, like one of the domes in Chrono Trigger, if you have played Chrono Trigger. So you would fight all of these big burly men and women, and you would go through this conveyor mini game / puzzle, and then you would make it to the top, and then just like be me sitting on like a pile of like a throne made of like recycled metal, and it would just be like little silly me with like pink hair and like super cute and dumb and silly, and that would basically be like my theme. As for my Pokemon type, it would be Poison. Why Poison? Because I know what you're thinking, but Max, you said you are basically Water and Psychic, and I am. I'm gonna show you how much of a nerd I am. This is my phone case, and it's one of those like Pokemon like sports theme, and mine is Sludge Waves. Why? Because I feel that poison types don't get any respect. I think that poison type Pokemon don't get any respect whatsoever. Team Rocket used them, and now everyone thinks they're evil, and that's not nice. As for what Pokemon I would use, I think I would just have like a party of like 6 Trubbish, and they would just have like troll tactics like Swallow and all of those other abilities. That would basically be like my team. Also, fun fact, while I was playing Pokemon Black, I had a Trubbish, and her name was Derpy, because it was Derpy the Trubbish. If you lived in the world of Pokemon, would you want to be a Pokemon master? If not, what else would you be? I remember once having like a really like deep and psychological conversation with somebody trying to break down the world of Pokemon. And I kind of realized that I don't really care for being a Pokemon master. Like, I'm not really that sportsman-like. And I just kind of... I think I would do something more on like... probably what I do now. I think I would just probably write fiction, and since Pokemon are kind of part of the world, I think I would probably just still be writing silly stories, just instead of it being silly stories about, you know, dumb gay babies, you'll be dumb gay babies and their Pokemon. I think that's what I would end up doing anyway, because I like telling stories, and I don't think that the existence of Pokemon would change, like, my lifestyle. If anything, I would just be posting, like, pictures of my pet Bidoof on Instagram. Share a funny story related to Pokemon. This is more sad than it is funny, but as I mentioned, I got my copy of Pokemon Blue back when I lived in Mexico, and I didn't speak English, and it would be like 3 more years until they translated Pokemon into Spanish. Fun fact, the team who translated Pokemon into Spanish in Mexico was the staff people over at Club Nintendo, the official Nintendo magazine of Mexico. Huh, funny. Yeah, so it would be a while before I was able to actually understand what the hell was going on. So, when I first booted up Pokemon, I couldn't actually find a way out of the house. Because, and everyone is laughing at me right now, but it's like, how am I supposed to assume that the mat leads me out of the house? Because from my point of view, I thought it was a table. So I was legitimately trying to look at the manual, trying to make out, how do I get out of this house? Because I lived in Mexico, we don't have like mats before our door. That to me was just weird and funny. And if you're still laughing at me, you cruel people. Take away 5 max points, you're just mean. Now that you know me, let's tackle some book questions. Pick one of your books or work in progress. What is the name of this book and what is it about? I'm going to be doing this one with Raven's Gem, which is a fantasy action-adventure novella set in this fantasy world that it's in the middle of its age of sail. That's kind of like the catch of the book, is that the people of Gadin have black blood, and they are able to channel the power of nature through gemstones. And aside from that, the story is seen from the point of view of Lucian Wade, who is a young man who has made a lot of mistakes in his life. Without going into too much detail, a bunch of things happen in the past, and Lucian is basically running away from them. He's running away from the death of his parents, the past of his friends, and the one person who kind of changed his life, or was trying to change it for the better. The story kind of launches into absolute chaos once said friend, Joanna Kin, challenges him to a duel to the death. How different would the story in your book be if Pokemon existed in that world? Ironically, since I'm writing a fantasy world, I honestly don't think Pokemon would change a lot. Like, I mentioned in the book that since the book deals a lot with like ships and trading and, you know, traversing various islands, I've mentioned that there's basically like sea monsters, you know, lingering around, causing chaos. So those sea monsters could easily be like Lugia totally not being terrifying, and a couple of Gyarados just ruining everything. Aside from that, I will go into detail later, but I do kind of feel that Pokemon just would not change a lot, would not change a lot of the setting, because it's fantasy, it's kind of ridiculous, and having all of these little cute creatures probably wouldn't change much. How do legendary Pokemon fit in your book? Just like I said, I do think that they would be treated as legends, like the sort of ridiculous thing that, you know, he said, she said, you know, 100 years ago that there was this enormous white bird that just caused chaos in the seas. Totally not Lugia. And I do kind of feel like they would serve as great plot points. Like, if I was to rewrite Raven's Gem with Pokemon, it would probably serve as a plot point that, you know, a red Gyarados or some sort of other, you know, legendary Pokemon kind of, you know, attacks their ship. Aside from that, I think that they are basically just legends. I don't think that they would play such a big role as the latest legendary Pokemon play in the most recent games. How would Pokemon be treated in your book? As much as I would love to say that everyone would treat Pokemon equally, that's probably not true. It takes place in a world in the Age of Sail. There's a bunch, I mean, it's basically, it takes a lot of the same societal elements of, you know, the Age of Sail from our timeline. So I have to be entirely, like, frank and admit that some people, probably young people, treat their Pokemon equally and treat them as friends, while the older people and the people who have a goal or an agenda treat them as property, basically. Again, everyone would like to think that, you know, in their book everyone is treated equally and there's no racism or sexism or any of those awful things, but I have to be frank and admit that probably in this book, yeah, Pokemon are probably treated as property. Would gym leaders exist in your book? I don't think so, primarily because there is very little reason for them to exist. Power is separated into, like, basically states, all ruled by the same empress, so there is very little reason for there to be, you know, figures of power who represent the use of the formal training of Pokemon. Again, Pokemon are basically just tools to be used in this world, so I don't think there would be gym leaders. Would there be organizations who take advantage of Pokemon like Team Rocket in your book? Not yet. Not yet. As I've mentioned, my world has kind of like a classic hierarchy, you know, governors that lead over cities and states, all of them ruled by the same super powerful empress. And I could easily see that probably in a couple 100 years, the peasants get tired of this and just launch a revolution. And I don't know about you, but it's a lot easier to launch a revolution when you have an army of dragons. So, for the time being, no, there are not. Though I can absolutely see someone taking advantage of Pokemon to rule the world. I mean, like I just said, it's pretty easy to take over the world when you have dragons on your side. And now for some character questions. Who is the protagonist of your book? The protagonist of my book is Lucian Wade. Lucian Wade is a 20-year-old merchant who was raised in a peasant family, and through a series of rather unfortunate events, he found himself having to make really tough choices at a really young age, and now he is mostly running away from his problems, and every time he attempts to do so, the past comes back to bite him in the butt. As I've mentioned, the story launches into action once his only remaining childhood friend, Joanna Kin, decides to challenge him to a duel to the death. Overall, though, Lucian is just kind of bitter, and I do feel that every time he tries to... I feel like he understands that he's only running away from his problems, but also his problems don't really have, an easy solution. So it's the sort of thing where it's like, I understand why you're doing this, and I wish there was an easier way, but that's life. Overall, though, he's just kind of really bitter that this is what his life has become. One bad event after another, after another, after another. What is the one Pokemon that best describes your protagonist? I thought this was going to be a really hard question, but as always, the first Pokemon that comes to mind is the correct one. Absol. Absol, absolutely. Ha! I didn't plan that. No, Absol, who happens to be the Chaos Pokemon, according to the lore, that wherever that Pokemon goes, horrible things follow. So I feel that it is incredibly fitting for Lucian Wade to be an Absol. If Pokemon existed in your world, how would your protagonist feel about them? I do kind of get the feeling that Lucian would not treat all Pokemon equally. I feel that he would treat some Pokemon as equals, depending on his relationship with them, and others he will just treat them as objects, basically. I do feel that Lucian would be one of the people who hold both ends of the stick, if you want to use that metaphor. I do feel that there are Pokemon that he would treat with respect, and he would treat as equals and as friends, and others that he would just treat as objects and possessions. Describe your protagonist's dream party. Now, I only picked 3 Pokemon because I wanted to keep it a little brief, but aside from that, Lucian's dream party would go a little like this. He would have, of course, an Absol, which kind of represents him as a person, a Chaos Pokemon, who witnesses chaos wherever it goes, a really old and grumpy Crobat, and a Sableye. Why these Pokemon? Well, the Absol makes sense because it's just the Pokemon that makes the most sense for Lucian. Now, story-wise, I think that he wouldn't have found Absol during Raven's Gem. I think he finds Absol in the next book, if that makes sense. Primarily because he faces a much harsher change in the second book, which I'm working on at this very moment. As for Crobat, Lucian's family was originally, where they were originally miners. They would just, go down into the caves and mine out, metals and gems. And if you're down there, you have to have someone to help you. So I like the idea of, the family Zubat who became a Goldbat and now it's a Crobat. Like a really old and grumpy Crobat, just basically following Lucian around, treating him like a baby. As for the Sableye, after Lucian's family met a horrible end and Lucian was basically thrown out on the streets, he became a bit of a thief. And of course, since gemstones are a really important part of the world of Gadeen, I figured that Lucian's thief party would need to have someone like a Sableye, someone who can tell apart the good gems from the bad gems. And aside from that, I was thinking about this and reflecting on this, and I kind of realized that Lucian would treat his Crobat like a pet. He would treat his Absol like a pet, but the Sableye, he would treat that Sableye like another person. Why? Because the Sableye is basically a goblin. It's humanoid, it's the size of a person, it kind of behaves like a person. I imagine that with enough training you can communicate with it. It's basically sentient for all, for all we care about. So I do kind of get the feeling that the Sableye would be less of a formal, Pokemon I own you sort of thing, and more like a member of the thief party. And I don't know about you, but that actually is kind of ridiculous to me. I actually kind of like looking at it from that point of view. The idea of the thief party having their Sableye who just munches on gemstones and picks out the good ones and the bad ones. Now for a really fun question. Pick a Pokemon game. If your protagonist was the main character in that game, what starter would they pick? So, as always, I like to go with my gut reaction, and if Lucian if Lucian was the main character in Pokemon Blue, my gut reaction is that he would pick a Squirtle, primarily because he's come from like a seafaring background, and I think he really appreciates having the ability of having someone who can help you when the ship goes down. That, and I get the feeling that Lucian would be at home with a Squirrel that has Surf. And for my favorite character question, if your protagonist existed in the world of Pokemon, would they want to become a Pokemon Master? If not, what else would they want to be? Lucian Wade does not want to be a Pokemon Master. I don't think so. No way in a million years. One, because he doesn't care about fame, he doesn't care about like glory and reputation. Ultimately, I feel that after having lived a life of like distress after distress after distress, family death after friend death after romantic misadventures, I think Lucian just kind of wants to have a quiet life. Or, if anything, the best life possible for himself and his friends. I think that, if anything, Lucian, since he's really good with money and resources and basically making deals and bartering, I think he would be like the person running like the big mega store in like the central town in the game. Now, if Lucian didn't own like a huge, enormous department store, I think he would own like a little hole in the wall sort of like bartering shop with like oddities and little things like that. I think mechanically speaking, he would probably be the character who sells you, like, the little trinkets you can equip on your Pokemon, probably. But no, Lucian Wade has no dreams of becoming a Pokemon Master. He has had an exciting life as it is. He probably just wants to settle down and just enjoy life without worrying about dying. Now, we are not done. As for the final part of this tag video, you have to go through questions 13 and 18 again with another character, preferably your antagonist. So let's go in and do it! Who is the antagonist of your book? The antagonist of my book is Joanna Kin, the youngest daughter of the most rich and powerful family in the entirety of Gadeen. Joanna is intelligent, she is very careful, very thoughtful, and if anything, rather maybe like a little too careful when taking action. That is why this book kind of goes into ultimate chaos when she decides to take a giant step and basically challenge Lucian Wade, her last remaining friend, to a duel to the death. Why does she do that? Well, you kind of have to read the book to find out. It's kind of a big spoiler. But aside from that, I like Joanna because she is a different spin on the idea of the spoiled child, because she's not spoiled at all. While her other two sisters are hella spoiled, she actually, at the age of 19, she doesn't live with her family, she lives on the other side of the continent, she runs her own mines, she takes care of all of the business side of the thing, and she's just really proactive. Of course, Joanna is not a robot, she carries some pretty awful scars on her heart emotionally, and all of which deal with a dumb boy named Lucian Wade. 'Cause my god. That being said, what is the one Pokemon that best describes your antagonist? This is a bit of a weird one, because there's a reference to another Pokemon game, but I think that she would be an Aron. Why an Aron? I like Aron because in the Pokemon Conquest games, Aron evolves when it achieves a certain amount of defense, and I feel that Joanna levels up in the story or grows as she kind of becomes tougher and tougher, and I mean that in a good way. Not tough as in the fact that you shut yourself away from the world, but tough in the fact that you realize that you have to make a stand for the things you believe in, and the things you want. I believe that Joanna, throughout the entirety of Raven's Gym, she's an Aron. She would be an Aron. But as soon as the book ends, she ends up making a really tough choice, and I would say that, thematically speaking, she evolves into a Larion. I like this Pokemon for Joanna primarily because it starts out being really cute and kind of feeble, and the older it becomes, the more experience it gains, the tougher it becomes, and the more imposing it is, because I think that Joanna is a sort of character who's heading down that path. She used to be kind of like a little kitty, quiet, careful, a little too careful, and I think the older she becomes, the stronger she's going to be. If Pokemon existed in your book, how would your antagonist feel about them? As much as I would love to say that Joanna, having a bit of a kinder heart, would consider all Pokemon equally, probably not. Probably not. As always, as I mentioned, there are Pokemon who are easier to like than others. I do feel that the Pokemon that she is close with, she treats them as friends. Maybe more so than pets, probably friends. But, of course, all of the other Pokemon that are used for the benefit of her industry are probably treated as objects. I know it's not a nice thing to say, but I mean, I'm being honest here. Considering the world that she lives in, the family she comes from, and the lifestyle that she's leading, it is entirely likely that all of those Pokemon used for hauling rocks and metal are probably being seen as cattle. Describe your antagonist's dream Pokemon party. This was a really easy for Joanna, because I kind of realized that as soon as I began thinking about it, all of the pieces fell into place. Joanna would absolutely have an Aron or a Larion, depending on what point in the story she's at. Aside from that, her family... Okay, the one thing that I didn't explain is that Joanna's family, the Kin family, deals all with one particular type of metal. The metal is known as true silver, and it is considered to be the most expensive metal in the entirety of the world. So I thought, well, clearly, the family's Pokemon must be a steel Pokemon, and I was thinking of Joanna's father, who appears in the latter part of Raven's Gem, and kind of shows up and reveals what sort of character this family has. I think he would have a Metagross, no question about it. Like, all-on steel Pokemon. And I thought, well, clearly, if this is the family Pokemon, then Joanna must certainly have a Beldum. Why a Beldum? Well, I do kind of feel that Joanna is just getting started. I think, she's only like 19 and like 3 months. She's clearly just getting started, and she's growing not only, as a person, but also, emotionally, and finding her own way in life. So it would only make sense that she's just getting started. So I think she would have an Aron or a Larion, a Beldum, and she's a rich girl from a rich family who has enjoyed all of the wonderful things in life. She clearly has a luxurious Pokemon, the sort of thing that people show around. And of course, what other Pokemon describes this better than Persian? To me, it just fits, it makes sense to me. Aside from that, I love the idea, because Joanna and Lucian lived together for a long while when they were children, and I love the idea of that Persian, back when it was a Meowth, teasing the hell out of Lucian. Maybe to the extent where, like, Lucian hates cats or all Meowth-like creatures. I can just see it as well, by the way. I can see, like, Joanna and Lucian in, Joanna's manner, trying to play around the garden, and then, like, that Meowth just, like, scratching Lucian in the face, or throwing dirt at him, or just being regularly mean. I can see that happening, absolutely. And would Lucian deserve it? Probably. I mean, I like Lucian, but, That being said, I would like to have a bit of an honorary spot for Joanna, because I think that if she did live in the world of Pokemon and she caught a particular Pokemon, I think she would probably absolutely have a Pachirisu, because Pachirisu is fierce, just like Joanna. Pick a Pokemon game. If your antagonist was the main character in that game, what starter would they pick? Now, just for fairness sake, I'm also gonna pick Blue, and ironically, like, the first thing that came to mind was a Bulbasaur, and earlier in Raven's Gem, I point out that Joanna lived near this enormous field of, like, violets, and I just like the mental image of, like, this, like, shiny Bulbasaur who has, like, purple, blossoms instead of, like, red ones. I think that's what the color it is for Ivysaur and Venusaur. So I also love the fact that, without thinking, Joanna has the Pokemon that is strongest against Lucian. I think that's just silly. If your antagonist existed in the world of Pokemon, would they want to become a Pokemon Master? If not, what else would they want to be? I had to think about this one for a while, actually, because as much as I want to say that, like, Joanna wouldn't want to, because she's led this life of fame and fortune and, just ridiculous amounts of money and just respect from everyone around her, I think that during Raven's Gem, she has no interest in it. But as soon as Raven's Gem is over, as basically the very, very final chapter of Raven's Gem, she changes. And I think that is kind of like the spark that would send Joanna to seek to be that, to seek to be a Pokemon Master. I absolutely see, like, badass Pokemon trainer Joanna, you know, traveling the world, beating up gym leaders and taking their badges. Yeah, I can see that, no question about it. Would she want to be anything else? A princess, but she's already a princess, so it doesn't even matter. No, yeah, I absolutely, I can see her. I can see her, you know, making it all the way to like the Elite Four, maybe even be like the Pokemon champ herself. I can see that happening, no question about it. So, there you go, that's all the questions I have for you today. What do you think about this video? Did you enjoy it? Was it silly? Was it cute? I've been meaning to make something like this for a while, and it wasn't until I shared the idea with my editor that I realized it was kind of too fun to pass up on, because I don't know, Pokemon has been a part of my life for like ever, and I've always been looking at the world of Pokemon and thinking, how would this work in any other setting? So, that being said, I hope that you really enjoyed this video, and if you would like to answer these questions, please do so. And if you make a blog post, or make a video, or reply, just, tag me on Twitter or on Tumblr, and let me know, because I totally want to see what you make, and I totally want to see your own thoughts on this. You know, would your characters want to be Pokemon Masters? I think that's kind of interesting, you know? I think it's a really good way to look not only at our setting and our books and the story, but also at our characters. So, I hope that you enjoyed this really, really silly video, and I hope that, maybe I've inspired you to take a couple of minutes from today and, consider your characters and your story. So, all of that being said, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you want more. That being said, if you would like even more writing content, you should head over to my writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com for your daily dose of writer positivity, writing prompts, writing advice, and more. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. Thank you for listening to me talk about how much I like Pokemon and how weird it would be if Pokemon existed in my fantasy book. Aside from that, by the way, if you really enjoyed this video and you would like me to answer these questions, like the book questions and the character questions, with any of my other books, leave it in the comments, let me know, yell at me, and then I will probably make a redux of this video where I talk about those books instead. So, that being said, again, thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I will be seeing you soon. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. So, until then, keep writing and gotta catch 'em all. Mwah!